All right, are we ready to broadcast?
We are indeed.
Great.
Good.
Well, hello, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. This was developed as the first of a series that we're developing in partnership between Good Thing Australia and Circular Economy Victoria to explore the emergence of the circular fashion economy and related topics. My name's Helen Steele and I'm the co-founder and chair of Good Thing. And I'd like to acknowledge my fellow co-founders and directors who I think are listening to this session. Good Thing was established last year as a vehicle to drive awareness of and inspire sustainable consumption of fashion and housewares in Australia. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional land on which we're meeting today, albeit virtually, the people of the Kulin Nation. Here in Melbourne, I'm on Wurundjeri land and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So the format for today's session will be a chat with our esteemed panellists who are convened about the impact that COVID-19 is having on the retail sector. And of course, we will invite your questions via the Q&A portal on the Zoom platform. Hopefully, from a technology perspective, you've all been able to join. But if there are issues, I think you can just send a little inquiry through chat or to Bethany, who would have sent you the link. So I'm really delighted today to be joined by such a fantastic panel. We're all kind of, we can't hide now in terms of, we don't have any events to go to, we don't have any restaurants to be eating in, so we've kind of got a bit of a captive audience in terms of panel. And I'm really thrilled that Lois McGruer-Fraser, who's the trusted voice and of course creator of the sustainable fashion brand Lois Hazel, is joining us. Michael McGann, who's the social enterprise manager at Sacred Heart. Sandra Capponi, who's co-founder of Good On You, the fashion label and ethical rating app that I'm sure all of you use. And lastly, but certainly not least, Michael Elias, who's the co-founder of MANRAGS, Australia's first sock and underwear subscription brand. Sounds fascinating. And just before I get to the panelists, and I hope you'll join me in welcoming them. Of course, in the face of just this just almost unbelievable time, many sectors, of course, not just sectors, individuals, we're all feeling the pain of COVID-19 in so many different ways, whether it be financially, just our lack of a capacity to reach out and connect in a physical way. So there's just been so many impacts, but you don't have to go very far, or if you're allowed to go far at all, to see the impact, of course, on the retail sector with, the shops closed, mostly. We're starting to see a few openings now. You just, read the daily news, there's reports of fashion and retail casualties, and an expected 20% of retail bricks and mortar stores will close in the coming months. The Australian Bureau of Stats has reported that retail spending in Australia has plunged by a record almost 18% in April, which is a decline of $5.38 billion as compared to the same time last year. Huge, significant impact. There is good news, however. Australian shoppers have flocking to online shopping sites, and there's going to be with an expectation now that online sales will account for 17% of the market in the future. So just give you a little bit of background of kind of what's going on. And perhaps, Lois, if I could turn to you first, and what's going on in your business? Maybe you could give us a little bit of insight into Lois Hazel, what you do, and how this has really impacted you.
Definitely. So, hi everybody, I'm Lois. For those who haven't heard about Lois Hazel, we are a Melbourne-based women's wear brand with a focus on kind of transparency, being accountable for the actions that we take in our business, sustainable sourcing, ethical production, kind of as we grow, delving further and further into better practices in business. So it's been 5 years since I actually launched the brand. And funnily enough, last month and this month have been our best months online, which was a shock because when everything was announced, stores were starting to shut down. Obviously you had that moment of panic, and we saw a significant decrease in traffic to the website. But yeah, it was almost like that lasted maybe a week and a half, and then after that it just spiked. And we've actually, the first time ever, done a recut in season. And again, this is one of the perks of producing locally, is that my mill knits and does everything here in Melbourne. So they've been able to do a 2-week turnaround and getting the fabric to me, and then I can go to my factory, which is literally 5 minutes up the road, and they're going to be able to cut and sew that 1-2 week turnaround. So you're looking at a month just being able to get it back out there, keep my business running, and keeping up with the demand. So it's been really, really interesting, and also seeing the number of new customers coming to the brand. It's not just old customers returning. So that's been extremely wonderful for me to kind of experience that. People are wanting to invest in local business and local fashion.
And how are customers, you just mentioned that you're getting lots of new business. How are those customers finding out about you?
We have been increasing our kind of presence online, so investing into kind of social ads, starting with Google Analytics, something that I don't know much about. So it's been a real interesting kind of journey. But I do wonder, obviously I've been so busy trying to kind of keep up with the demand, I haven't been able to stop and really look back on where all these, new customers are coming from. But I wonder, there could be a good amount coming from platforms like oh my gosh, I've just gone blank.
Hey, you're online, you can Google it.
Exactly. And also like other bloggers, like we have been reaching out and working with other Melbourne-based bloggers and influencers and stuff. They've actually been really helpful because we really make sure that we align ourselves with people who have similar values. We don't just kind of create partnerships with people who we don't know much about. So that's been really great to get and reach out to new customers, especially weirdly New Zealand. We've been getting a huge amount of sales to New Zealand, which has been phenomenal. I feel awful for them because all their parcels are still stuck in transit due to the delays. But again, I think it's just a lot of Googling, a lot of people are searching Melbourne brands, locally made. And I think luckily, I've been coming up as one of those, I guess, answers.
Yeah. And so Michael McGann, maybe I can turn to you. On this panel, you're kind of representing, the bricks and mortar, retail store with the Sacred Heart op shops, which are scattered all around Melbourne. And you've been closed, of course, during this time and about to open again tomorrow. So what's the impact been to your business? And then, I'm be interested in a little bit later to consider, the secondhand clothing market and the impact of that just more broadly.
So we've got 12 stores around Melbourne, and the way our mission is set up is that those stores, all the profit from those stores underpins services delivered by Sacred Heart Mission to homeless and disadvantaged people, so meal programs and what have you. So we generate actually about 30% of the mission's revenue out of the 12 stores. So 3rd of April, we closed all of them down. And so the financial impact back to the mission has probably been the biggest negative out of the whole thing. We've stood down 60 staff, so not made anyone redundant, but just stood people down until we can reopen stores. We've sort of had to let volunteers go because there's nowhere for them to go. And then there seems to be a whole lot of community flow on from that. So surprising the number of messages that come through saying, when are you opening? I can't wait to come back in. And, and then there's all of the, I've been emptying my cupboards and I've got all this stuff. When are you going to be open so that I can drop it into you? So there's been a really interesting sense of sort of community goodwill as well around, that role that we play for a lot of people who want to actually try and recycle and get stuff reused that they've got. I guess I think the biggest impact for us is really the money flow back into Sacred Heart Mission, which ultimately means if that money is not flowing, then trying to continue those services operating means the organisation has to draw on its reserves. And reserves are obviously there for emergencies. And fortunately, we've got plenty of them, but they do run out pretty quickly as well when you're trying to pay staff and what have you. So so fortunately we'll be opening 4 stores tomorrow, well 3 stores tomorrow, and a 4th on Saturday. So we'll see what happens with that. I think it'll be pretty interesting.
We may need to let our listeners know, Michael, where those stores are opening, because I'm not sure what's been happening in your neighbourhood and those of our listeners, but certainly in my neighbourhood, and I'm in the South Melbourne Albert Park area. I mean, our community, they've sort of come out onto the nature strips and setting up their own little whether it be bookshare or I've noticed people pulling out clothing racks to share. I guess we're spending so much time in our homes that we've actually got the time and the capacity to sort through our wardrobes at the moment and kind of have that cleanse. So, it's kind of been a bit of a grassroots movement in my neighbourhood, which has kind of been delightful to see, considering we're not really being able to interact. I think it's been a really wonderful way of bringing the community together. So anyway, we better, before this finishes, let our listeners know where those stores are, so they can go and drop off that product.
Well, and I think that's, so certainly our South Melbourne store around the corner from you, Helen, will be opening tomorrow.
Fantastic.
Our Chapel Street and Commercial Street stores will also open tomorrow, and then our Preston store opens on Saturday. But the other thing, you just raised an interesting point, which I'd made a note of and forgotten to mention, was that some people have felt that it's okay to still donate while shops are closed. So we've actually had all of those fixed costs that you have as a bricks and mortar business, plus the issue of having to actually dispose of everything that's been left outside stores, which normally we would be able to process and figure out what's good and can be resold, or what can be put into recycling and sold into recycling, and what would ultimately end up in landfill. And unfortunately, over the last 8 weeks, I'd say 98% of it has ended up in landfill because we've just had no.
Yeah, that's another casualty, I guess, in this whole pandemic. Sandra, maybe I could turn to you. I mean, you kind of really have a bit more of a global view on what's going on, and you have recently spent time in Paris as well, and other places. And so I'm just really interested in your views on what you're seeing happening just to the fashion sector more broadly through this time.
Yeah, I was in Paris right up until the middle of March, when, obviously was the peak of when the crisis hit, certainly in Europe, and then soon after in Australia. I was participating in a retail tech accelerator program where, good on you, were engaging with a number of big names in fashion on how we could help drive forward their sustainable innovation. So it was a really, cool and exciting time, but of course, a lot has changed since then. I had to rush home. I was quarantined for some time. And a lot of those conversations that we were having with the major players in fashion have been shelved. And it's not because they don't think sustainability is important in this context. In fact, there's a lot of recognition that sustainability in fashion was already a trend, but the sentiment and the value behind sustainability in fashion is arguably growing in this context. But just the very nature, the economic impacts to large business of the crisis has meant they're really struggling. Some are having to close down, have gone bankrupt, are in the short term prioritising what to do with their very large workforces and what to do with huge amounts of excess stock that they've not been able to move. And that's heightened, of course, for traditional physical retailers and department stores, but even major online players have had huge amounts of stock that they haven't been able to move. Some of them, unfortunately, have responded by cancelling orders that were already committed with suppliers in places like India and Bangladesh and Cambodia, putting huge pressure on factories in those regions, and of course putting the livelihoods of workers in those regions at risk. So I guess the flip side is the other, I guess, main purpose of Good On You, which is, you know, elevating and promoting the brands that are doing good and connecting them to our really big community of shoppers that are looking to make more ethical, sustainable choices. And that has actually taken off. A similar story to what Lois was saying. You know, I think in March, things did take a downturn. I think, you know, I personally was freaking out. I think a lot of people were just trying to understand what was happening and what it would mean for the long term. But then we adjusted, we learnt more. We still don't know what's going to happen in the long term, but we've come to terms with the immediate situation. And yeah, you know, people in our community who already wanted to make more conscious shopping choices are even more motivated to support brands and support brands that do protect workers, support brands that are local and that think about the long-term sustainability of their practices. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing also engagement levels in April almost double what they were in March, and lots of enthusiasm and growth around supporting brands. I hope, Lois, you're seeing some traffic from Good On You, because yeah, that's a role we really feel we can play, is creating a platform, an online platform for brands doing good to connect with, you know, a highly motivated market.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that you said that there's been an increase in traffic to your website and through the use of the app. I mean, well, because we've got the time to do it, but you know, I think you're right that I think the silver lining will hopefully be that, you know, there is more conscious decision making happening, you know, as we consume and think about that. So Sandra, how many brands do you actually have represented on the app?
We've rated over 2,500 brands. Right. From, you know, small emerging designers in Melbourne through to, you know, the major high street brands in the US and Europe. We're trying to rate, you know, every brand in fashion, because that's what's going to really empower everyday people with information that can help them make better choices. There's no use just telling people only about the most sustainable brands or only about the biggest brands in fashion, because then that doesn't, you know, allow action on what to do next once you've got that information. So we're trying to allow people to look up ratings for any brand that they might like, that they might have seen, and if they're not happy with that rating, to discover more sustainable and ethical alternatives that still, you know, match the other things that we all care about when we're buying fashion, which is price and style and location.
Yeah, and I'm interested. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned earlier is about the supply chain. So of course, it's not just you know, it's not just the brand and the fashion house. It's about, you know, the whole supply chain that's been impacted. You know, I know in Michael's case, it's volunteers and workers, but gosh, I mean, the trickle down effect to the supply chain is going to be vast. Do you think, Sandra, we're going to see a bit of a shift back to localization? You know, because we've become, you know, incredibly global, and how we source. Do you think, you know, there will be a shift to much more sort of Lois Hazel style kind of production?
I'm not exactly an expert on economic trends, but I can see from, you know, how people are engaging with Good On You. A lot of our users on social and you know, in our community, they're asking us, how can I search and filter by brands that are close to me?
Yeah.
And we're also noticing that some of the larger players that we're still talking to overseas are looking to collaborate at a more local level and looking to innovate when it comes to these issues at a more local level. So anecdotally, it's pointing to yes.
Well, you mentioned as we had a chat, you know, before we went live tonight, that of course our next guest, Michael Elias, who represents MANRAGS, you know, that they're I think they must be on your app. Am I correct?
Not yet. They're on our radar.
They're on your radar.
That's right.
And so Michael, perhaps I could turn to you. I mean, you were established as a digital, you know, a digital subscription. So what's the impact been to your business, and how are you shifting? And we're hearing the words agile and transition and transformation. What are you doing in your business to deal with the current situation?
Yeah, we launched MANRAGS as a subscription for a number of reasons, but from a financial perspective, it was to be able to manage recurring revenue. I mean, that was we are not a not-for-profit; we are a for-profit. So we wanted to manage, book our our purchasing and ensure that we weren't impacting kind of overproduction. So we know what's coming in the next couple of months, so we can order accordingly. So we can actually order to the individual sock if we need to. But obviously don't do it that way. Last year, we introduced our sock recycling initiative, which we started questioning ourselves as to what was happening with our product and where that was ending. And unfortunately, in this country, socks end up in the bin and in landfill. And so we introduced our Start With Socks initiative, and within kind of four or so months, we had diverted over 500,000 pairs of socks from landfill, which will then be go to either a reuse in a second life market where they're fit for that, or they turn into new yarn. And throughout the last few months, we've had a lot of our customers kind of recycling their socks with us, say, when can we do more? When can we do more? There's a lot of textiles out there that are ending up in the bin. And to Michael's point, unfortunately, that is just the situation. So we were thrown into a situation where we bit of a fight or flight, really. We saw people cancelling orders, cancelling subscriptions. It was kind of very knee-jerk reaction because people didn't know what was happening, and it was just, let's cover my ass here and be safe, really. And with that, we had plans to launch our program in the States. That came to a grinding halt, and we quickly adapted and were agile and nimble, and we decided to bring forward our textile recycling initiative to life earlier than anticipated. We had planned it for July, and we brought it to life, I think, the first week of April, and we've seen a fantastic response with that. A lot of people are at home cleaning out their wardrobes, and we can educate them that we can, there's a reuse, repurpose, or recycle opportunity to all the textiles that they're throwing out. Then let's do that, and let's focus on that over this period. So we shifted our focus from sales and brand awareness to let's focus on sustainability. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride for us, and we've had to move very, very fast, and yeah, it's created some great opportunities and some challenges that we've had to deal with.
Yeah, I'll bet. And I mean, you've kind of your whole business is really built around this idea of the circular economy and circular fashion. And and it's been great having all these conversations about purpose-led organizations, similar to yourself, and thinking about the environment. And I guess perhaps a question for you all, is that going to be a luxury that we have going forward? I mean, I know, Sandra, you said, yes, you thought, that it's going to become more in the conscious mind of consumers, but will it really? I mean, having said that, I'm not sure that I see the future of fast fashion, although, discretionary spending is going to, come to an all-time low. So I'm just kind of interested in your ideas, and maybe Michael, will start with you about, is this circular economy thinking, is it really going to be the way forward?
We, as with our growth, we've had to bring on, and we brought on a partnerships manager because there's a lot that we're doing, and there's a lot that we believe that we can do. His discussions over the last 5 or 6 weeks have been very fruitful. But the truth of the matter is, right now, everyone is, focused on, kind of staying alive, and staying afloat. So unfortunately, all the larger brands that we're talking to, everyone really is, is keen and interested and wants to do their best, But right now, there's this overarching what does tomorrow bring and what does the next hour bring. So I don't doubt that once we're on the other side of this, and as things get, there's more normality, that we will see this increase. I think we've seen a lot of people want brands to engage with them beyond just sell us something, like tell us what you're doing, that's good. But unfortunately, the last few weeks have just been, yes, we love this, we want to do this, we're so keen, we've hired people to do this, but right now that person is stood down. Or, right now we're just trying to figure out how we deal with all these containers of stock coming in and none of our stores are open. So that, I think it will come to life, and it will, be at the forefront soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
But there has been a bit of a road, a bump in the road.
Yeah. And in the research that I've been doing in the lead up to this discussion, I mean, I was looking at, some of the future trends, and one of the things that futurists are suggesting is that, experiential shopping is going to be part of the wave of the future. We're not going to just purchase an item and not know its, the history of how it was made. We're really going to want that sort of experience. I mean, I know, Lois, that's kind of been your sort of ethos in the way that you've built Lois Hazel. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I launched the brand, I think something that I really wanted was let my customers be a part of the full journey of the garment. I've still got a huge way to go in being able to delve deeper into my supply chain, but something that I'm really passionate about is like being able to do as much as you can do within the space you're in. And I know that, the information that I do share with my customers, they really enjoy it. And I think it's just bringing them into the brand, because my journey, I guess, of sustainable fashion was learning to make clothes, and that discussion around why some people celebrate it, other people aren't, why some people hidden in the industry and others kind of really on show. And so I see a lot of that starting to change, and people wanting to see inside these factories. They want to know, well, where's this fabric coming from? What plant is it grown from? Where's the mill from? And I notice when I start to share that information with my customers, like the communication I get back from them is incredible, and they get really excited because for so long it's been hidden, that it almost makes them want to support you more, knowing that you are doing more than just create clothes. And going back to the point of looking at fast fashion, I think what's been really interesting is seeing how small brands have been able to be really nimble. We haven't got this reliance upon constant cash coming in because we're constantly, selling product. It's more about letting our customers invest in our product. Obviously, it is a higher price point, meaning we don't need to sell as many, has allowed us to kind of, I guess, survive this period. Yeah. Whereas, others...
And you don't have the overheads of,
no.
of rent and, those other costs.
Definitely. And it was interesting. The factory that I work with were saying how, unfortunately, a lot of the big Australian retailers who they were manufacturing for refused to pay for the stock that was made because they were like, well, we don't want it. But it was the smaller brands that were coming in and saying, actually, we need you to make stock for us because we need more. And they did even say to me once that they were even finding brands that were developing product offshore were coming to them and going, we need you to make stock for us because we can't access the stock that we need here now to sell onto our customers. So that was really interesting, I guess, discussion with them, seeing how people were coming to them desperately to be like, can you make stuff for us?
So Michael McGann, I mean, the other part of the sustainable clothing piece, of course, is not just in Michael Elias's case, the recycle, but in your case, the secondhand clothing market. I mean, what's your sense? I know, as Michael Elias said, we're kind of in the thick of it right now. We're not quite sure what it's going to look like, but what's your sense in terms of the opportunities around secondhand clothing?
I think that we'll probably see a really short-term spike. I think, as people kind of offload everything that they've been hanging on to, people will recognise that, okay, well, op shops are probably going to be a place where you can, get some great bargains and find some really great clothes. I think Helen, you touched on the issue of, disposable income. I think that's going to play a really big part, and I honestly don't know whether that will work in our favour or not. I mean, you've got people out there who have got more money than they used to have because they're on JobKeeper, so they're getting paid a flat wage for which is more than they've earned in the past.
Yeah.
You've got people who are on the same incomes, and then you've got people who are earning less. So I really don't know what role disposable income is going to play in just, in the short term around our businesses. I think where secondhand clothing and where it fits into sort of sustainability and circularity, I think that needs to be a really well communicated connection. I think a lot of people do see op shops, I think, as as the place for a bargain, not necessarily the place to go where you can actually find really great quality clothes you can wear every day, clothes you can wear to the office, a substitute for going into the high street to get stuff, so, and I think that's probably for us, that's maybe the space that we need to be thinking about positioning ourselves within. And I think, just coming to one of Michael's points too, I think one of the bigger issues I think we're going to face is there's no overseas market for exporting fabric anymore. We would normally sell, so from January to March, beginning of April when we closed, we'd probably sold 7,000 kilos of fabric and textiles into recycling that would end up overseas. That market has completely collapsed. The company we work with, the company they work with overseas have just closed down. So suddenly, they've basically been left with being owed money that they can't get, and they're not the only one. So unless there's a local kind of market for that kind of solution, then I'm not sure. I think we may end up seeing more stuff ending up in landfill because there are no local solutions for that. So I think it's actually, the more I kind of think about it, the more uncertain it is. Yeah. And as much as I'd like to put a positive spin on it, I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, and I think just, picking up on a few of your comments there, I mean, I think we are in a bit of a kind of an economic bubble right now because we're being propped up by, government relief packages. And it'll be interesting, and a lot of those, JobKeeper, it runs out in September. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens post that. But what you've also made me think about is, local collaboration is going to be really important. And I guess we're going to need more kind of businesses like Michael Elias's, MANRAGS, to be able to take your fabric and and repurpose that. So and I believe there's already been a conversation between the two of you, but I guess I see that perhaps one of the trends that's going to emerge is collaborations between businesses that have mutual interests, but it might be sometimes business unusual as well that ends up with collaboration. And I know, good thing, we had a plan to run a pop-up retail store or a series of those to be able to showcase the work of, the sustainable fashion community, and in partnership with many brands, and maybe that sort of thing will happen more and more as well. But maybe you can speak a little bit more to, that idea of local collaborations.
Well, certainly, I mean, as I say, the company that we would normally sell all of our recycling into, they're looking, from what I understand, they're talking to other players in their space about forming some kind of local company to help manage this sort of thing. So that would be encouraging. In terms of partnerships, there seems to be more partnerships coming in to play between brands and charity networks like ours. Salvos, we've got a relationship with Seed Heritage. Perry Cutton recently donated a whole lot of clothes to us as well, which we were able to sell on our online store, which has been our main form of income whilst all of our bricks and mortar shops have been closed. So I think that's certainly an opportunity for expanding what circularity looks like. I think that's going to be the future in many ways, because I think as the mainstream kind of fashion houses start to sort of bring stuff in, and then they still will have to manage excess stock, hopefully we will become a much more obvious solution for how to kind of deal with that, rather than just dumping it or potentially just trying to sell it overseas into other markets. But look, I'm not 100% sure what it all looks like. So, and I am reasonably new to Sacred Heart Mission, so there's a lot of bits and pieces that I'm figuring out as we go as well.
So just for those listening, I mean, I do invite you to send us questions via the Q&A tag down the bottom of your screen. But Sandra, I guess, you know, there's quite a bit of doom and gloom, and I think that one of the things we do need to think about as, you know, within our local community as retail stores begin to open, and we need to think of, as consumers, how we're going to support those. I mean, how, like on a global level and a local level for that matter, I mean, what are your thoughts around what we can do as consumers to support those stores as they reopen? Other than the obvious and just shop.
Well, I think it's, you know, continuing to think about what your values are on you know, engaging with brands. Do you care about minimising your carbon footprint or your environmental impact? Do you care about making sure that the people, often women, that made your clothes were not harmed? Are you vegan, and do you want to make sure that you know, no animals were impacted as a result of making your clothes? You know, each of us has the things that we care about, and through our purchasing decisions with anything, but fashion especially, we can influence change, especially collectively. And I think we can also send a message to the industry right now about, you know, the opportunity we see, which is, you know, brands that are resilient through times like this, because they have prioritised people and planet from the beginning. They have thought about long-term outcomes from the very beginning, and they've thought about circular business models and taken responsibility, not just for producing something, but, you know, then what happens with that item even after it's been sold? Are there ways that it can be resold, recycled? You know, there's many things that can happen to prevent it, even better cared for and mended. All of these things can prevent clothes from ending up into landfill, which we know is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, economic, environmental impacts of fashion today.
Mm-hmm. So Lois and Michael Elias, I mean, what do you, how do you think, you know, your how can we support you, I guess, as you kind of rebuild your business?
I mean, support, you get it obviously from customers purchasing things, but I think support for a better future for the industry is just investing in brands who are doing better, because the more people who get behind something, so say like GOTS organic cotton thread, or, you know, recycled polyester, innovative things at beginnings are more expensive. So obviously brands like myself find it hard to engage with kind of better practice because I simply can't afford it. So I think if customers kind of start to really show brands that they're willing to pay that extra, whatever it may be, so that these businesses and these brands can invest in better practices, I think will be, you know, a great way to go. It'll also give people like myself the confidence to invest in things that maybe, because that's something that stops me from doing better things in my brand, is because I can't financially afford to do it, which is so irritating when I find something that's super exciting and then I go to kind of cost up something. I'm like, that's not even, I can't do it right now. So I think through consumers showing brands, bigger brands, smaller brands, that they're willing to pay, you know, whatever the difference is, which allows people like myself, like Michael, the number of brands on Good on You, to kind of have that better practice is so important.
And Michael Elias, just as I'm moving to you, there has been a question that's popped up specifically for you as well. One of our listeners is keen to know what the challenges that MANRAGS has faced since launching a direct-to-consumer textile recycling program. So maybe you can think about answering that, and also then think about, you know, how consumers can support your business.
Yeah, look, I think from a consumer support, advocacy and endorsement, you know, that's massive. So you know, whether people can or cannot, you know, support financially, advocacy and endorsement is, you know, is free. So,
Yep.
you know, I've seen influencers, you know, with, you know, millions of followers right now put things up around, hey, how can you support a small business or your local business? Put up a post about them. It'll cost you nothing, and do it yourself. So I think that's, you know, that's a big piece. You know, we don't know what we don't know, and this is kind of leading into this question here. We don't know what we don't know, but we're learning along the way, and we've been very upfront and honest with that to say, you know, there are a lot of things that we're still learning. We have a lot of answers, and we're finding more. We're an interested bunch, and we're educating our people along the way as well. In terms of direct challenges from textile recycling, so you know, challenges and opportunities, but challenges is we've had to hire at least a new warehouse. You know, that's a challenge. Then who the hell is going to man that warehouse? So that's created a challenge, but it's also created an opportunity because we've put someone in that warehouse that was impacted and lost their role because of, you know, COVID. So, you know, that's the good side of that. But, you know, we're also seeing things, you know, some of the challenges, you know, we ask people to wash what they send us.
Great.
You know, it just makes everything a lot easier. The separation process is probably the most difficult in all of this. And so, you know, one of the things that we're beginning to face is, you know, how do we separate to ensure that what is for reuse is definitely for reuse, and we can share that with Sacred Heart, and you know, we could share that with Good Thing. You know, we're seeing things like that, but we want to ensure that we can do that very well. Unfortunately, some of the, you know, challenges again is the cost of that is really high. What labor and, you know, that's you know, the biggest expense we face. Just, you know, pre-recycling is the biggest expense in the business. So, you know, fortunately, we've had to, you know, going back to the partnerships piece. You know, we've forged some pretty good partnerships with a number of charity and partners who have said, you know, take our volunteers, let us help you, and we've said, yeah, come in and help us sort and take whatever you like. Like we want to see this, you know, get a second life. So yeah, look, I think that's probably the biggest challenge, but we're still, and again, you know, we don't know what we don't know. We're still learning along the way. So yeah, there's a number of them. You know, the warehouse we got next door, I reckon we're not far off having to get another one. So
Wow.
yeah.
So I did notice in those participants that we have online, I believe Councillor Susan Riley from the City of Melbourne is online, and I guess just a question for you guys. And I know that the City of Melbourne in particular has really been offering lifelines to particularly their bricks and mortar retail stores. But what do you guys want from, you know, your local councils? How can they support your work? And Michael McGann, maybe we start with you as you're kind of, you know, the bricks and mortar in this story. What help would be helpful from them for you?
Well, we actually get quite a bit from the state government. So the state government has a landfill relief levy that we can access, which helps to reduce our costs for tipping stuff. And that's for all charitable recycling organisations. So that makes a huge difference to our overheads. Look, I mean, from our perspective, we have to act and think like a commercial business. So we pay commercial rents and we pay staff. So there's probably some small things, I suppose, that local governments could do, and I can't really think of any off the top of my head at the moment. But I think the other issue for local government in the environment that we're in is that they've lost huge amounts of revenue as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's really tough. I think we have to be realistic about the role that we play as an ecosystem and how we all support each other. And, you know, for me to go and ask for relief from council needs to be done in the context of what I can return to council. And I think sometimes we have to stop just putting our hand out, because the money to deliver services has to come from somewhere. That's, I'm a big believer, that's the role of taxes as well. So,
Exactly. I mean, and you said that, you're kind of dipping into your reserves. Well, I think, nationally we're dipping into our reserves as well. And the money's got to come from somewhere, right? But I guess I was thinking more, not just, financial support, which we've seen quite a lot of that, but, other practical ways that councils can help. And look, I know we're sort of running out of time, but I guess as we sort of go to some final questions, and I'm going to come back to all the panelists before we end for kind of a positive lining from all that COVID's throwing at us. But a question that's just come in from Sam for Lois or Michael Elias. Have either of you been able to specifically identify your sustainability initiatives as a source of competitive advantage as you've started out with your brands? So yeah, he's speaking my language, Sam. I'm not sure whether you're a boy or girl, but you're speaking my language there with shared value. So Michael, maybe we start with you. I mean, are you gaining competitive advantage, do you think, from the approach that you're taking?
Yes, the answer is yes, but we're not. Oops, sorry.
That's fine.
My son sets fake reminders for me. Go home. I think yes, we are seeing competitive advantage, but I think what we've set out to do from the very beginning is. In the very beginning, I talk about our journey into being, purpose-driven, and after questioning ourselves and what we were doing, is we want to demonstrate that sustainability equals success, and I think if we can do that, that will create more competition. But that's the exact mindset that we want people to go, do good things come, and don't want definitely not ready to stand on top of a mountain and yell that out just yet. But yeah, I think there is. We are in a place where competition is limited. As a business, we have to kind of double down, knuckle down, go hard on that, and claim our authority. So that's my business talk, but that's how it is. But also with that. That will invite competition. So that's great, and that's what you want, because there's more people jumping on and doing things, and other brands looking at you, and other companies going, well, if they can do that, why can't we do it? So that's a good thing in the world of sustainability.
Absolutely. And what about you, Lois?
I definitely agree with that. It's funny because I think I never went in to do what I was doing as a way to gain more from it. It was just this is how I want to run my business. And obviously I do not hide a thing. I put everything on my website. So if I was trying to be competitive with how my sustainability, things I've chosen to do, I'm doing a terrible job at it, because everyone can do exactly what I'm doing. But the same thing, there's been brands that have come up and they do more, and they do different things to me. And it almost makes me, want to do more. And I think it's not, I never see it as competition, but rather as that little fire beneath you kind of saying, okay, well, what more can I do? And you do have to be careful, because obviously sometimes if there's a brand that is doing something that you see as better, you can get down on yourself and go, I'm not doing enough. But it's also a great way to kind of push you to say, well, if it is possible to do, I can do it. And I hope that sometimes I'm inspiring other brands to see, well, if she's able to, I run my brand as a wholesale model. We also go direct to consumer. So I want my business to be successful, obviously not just so I can, live off my business, but also to show people it's possible to, build a brand that's transparent, ethically made, using, traceable, good fabrics that aren't bad for the planet, and help people. If you can show that it's doable, then people don't really have an excuse not to do it.
Sandra, of course, this is a discussion that we started many years ago together. And you've got, as you said, more than 2,000 brands represented on Good On You. So I would think that's a fairly good indicator that, there's obviously a commercial reality to this type of thinking.
Yeah, we've rated 2,500 brands. Of those, about 500 are rated good or great, which is kind of the top two levels in our scoring system. So that shows, you know, that there is an emerging market of brands that are stepping up to be more transparent and to prioritise sustainability initiatives. But I guess more than that, Good on You exists because there's this thing called a conscious consumer market that is very real and it's growing, and more people want to make sustainable choices. They still want to look good and feel good when they're doing it, but yeah, they are influenced by sustainability in a broader consideration set when they're making purchases. And so, you know, brands that are slow to step up to that consumer demand will inevitably lose market share. So there is a real competitive advantage story to it, and I think it's both the growing number of brands and the growing group of consumers that are looking for those brands that attest to that.
So just as we're wrapping up now, because we've just got a few minutes left, maybe I could just ask each of you to, you know, reflect on what you've learned actually during, you know, COVID-19, and then what your kind of, I guess, hope for the future of retail and fashion is. So just because I can see, you know, you're all looking lined up on my screen. So Michael, Elias, maybe I'll start with you.
I think we probably learnt that people want to be engaged with and communicated to in different ways than what has been traditionally, you know, normal. And I think there's a lot more people online, a lot more people scrolling. That engagement, you know, the stories that we're sharing, you know, I'll put simply, our engaging emails have a better financial result than when we're putting something out to buy something. And I think that just demonstrates that people want to be communicated to differently. And I think the longer this goes on for, the more we'll see that as a norm, as, you know, the previous buy kind of approach. So yeah, that for me is just, we're just seeing a shift in our consumer mindset and what they're engaging with, and you know, we have to adapt to that. And again, you know, similar to Lois's point, because we are small, we can do that very quickly. We don't have a 18-month marketing calendar booked, you know, so.
Yeah.
Lois.
Oh gosh, I mean, I'll go to the future one. I think what I hope to see through this is just continued support for local brands, and the people seeing the benefit of supporting small emerging brands that are doing better and doing good as their priority. And I think one of the things that's really been mind-blowing for me during this whole thing is, people are doing just that. They're coming and they're supporting brands. So many of my friends who have incredible brands as well have seen the exact same support, and it's been phenomenal. So it's just been a very weirdly encouraging period, which I did not expect to be.
Michael McGann.
I've been reminded how quickly your world can be turned upside down without realizing it. It reminds me of the GFC time. I'm also kind of reminded that having a values-based business is so incredibly important. That, you know, that really at the end of the day, there's only a certain percentage of any market who are going to be attracted to what you do. And so making sure that you are speaking loudly and clearly in an authentic voice is what will bring people to you, you know, and that's how you'll build a brand, that's how you'll build a customer base and build a loyal customer base. And, you know, I think for us, even though we have all the added kind of weight, I suppose, of being, you know, a large and well-known charity, our stores have to have their own unique brand that stands out a little bit from that for those people who don't really know what the mission does. So I think, that's one of the big things for me. And I think aligned with that then is the value of, if circularity and sustainability in fashion and retailing is going to grow, then there needs to be some really loud voices and some big brands really jumping behind this to kind of drag consumers and industry along the way with it. to kind of get it to a point where it's where it is kind of fixed in the environment that we work in.
Sandra, some closing thoughts from you.
I think that the crisis has really spotlighted the fragility of the systems that underpin the retail sector and specifically the fashion sector. I know many of us on this panel have been harping on about many of these issues for a long time, from just the inherent unsustainability of linear production models, and the impact of production on workers in some underprivileged countries. But these have really been, heightened and sadly put under more pressure in the current crisis. But because of that, and almost a forced slowdown for many of us personally, and certainly for industry, there is a great opportunity for change. There is a chance to reevaluate what's important and to rebuild businesses in a way that does prioritise the long term, that does put people first, and can address these core issues that have always been there but are exemplified in this environment. Yeah,
I think Sandra, you've just hit the nail on the head for me. I mean, this is all about the human condition, isn't it? And even though we've been sort of isolated from each other, I think we still want that connection, and I think we've really got to think of the human aspect on everything that we do going forward. And I think even though we're moving to online and all of these other platforms, I think, and AI and all of those things, I mean, I think that the human condition and the relationships that we want and have are just coming through loud and clear. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists today, the two Michaels, Lois and Sandra. Thanks so much for your time. As I mentioned, we are planning to do this as a series, and I'd really like to thank Circular Economy Victoria for partnering with Good Thing on the production of this session. We are hoping to bring you another panel. In fact, we are going to bring you another panel in June, and details will come around shortly about that. I'd like to thank all of those who've taken the time. We kind of hope that we pick sort of the right time in the day between your transition from your, well, maybe you hadn't gone offline yet, but as I'm sure you walk now into your kitchen to prepare your dinner, I hope we've hit the right time for you, and that the kids aren't screaming too loudly, and and that the television isn't up too loudly. But look, thanks for all of your questions. I really appreciate your time. I think from my perspective, what I've learnt today is, to Michael Elias's point, we don't know what we don't know. We're learning through this, these just such incredible times. I think a lot of good will ultimately come from it. I think that concept of collective action, I think will really come through. I think there's hope for a thriving circular economy, and I think fashion and retail will be vastly different, but I think hopefully for the better going forward. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks to everyone listening, and we look forward to you joining us for the next session next month. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.